even before the 2008 financial crash, not only was especially the papers like the right wing press going heavily after, um, you know, immigrants, but more especially benefit claimants, calling them lazy, scroungers, whatever, you name it. They were called some incredibly, bad names by, the right wing press. And then you also had things like Channel 4, who for years were accused by various, you know, uh, campaign groups for essentially making poverty porn. Just, focusing on these. I mean, one of the prime examples was one called Benefit Street. Was obviously like the key example of that, and one of the things that they did as well back then. But over time, this sort of became the norm of, you demonize these people. They're not they're not working properly. But again, going back all these time, you look at all the data of what was going on with these people. These people, didn't have the opportunity. Maybe travel was an issue. Remember, in South Yorkshire today, we still face the issue of, I think it's one in 5 people in South Yorkshire will turn down a job because they can't travel to it. And that's because they don't have either a car, or public transport can't get there easily enough for them to do it. So there are lots of issues that do contribute to keeping people in a vast, terrible cycle of poverty. And not only that, but our benefit system as well isn't really helping a lot of these people out either. So it is going to be, as I've said before, 2022 is going to be a hard year for a lot of people, especially now with the inflation, the price increase, energy crisis. The war in Ukraine is going to have a knock on both of those things as well. Food is up, inflation is up, you name it. A lot of people are not going to be in for a very good year this year. And it's going to be bad for a whole lot of people. I don't really else how to say it or how to put it. It's going to be really bad for a lot of people out there in the UK, especially those in who are the poorest in our society. So before we do go jumping into this article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel that way. So, this comes from The Guardian with the title of, "To those people who wish to penalise poor people, cold and hunger are signs of a perfect system." Two things are about to happen in Britain. The next month, ministers will increase the value of benefits by just 3.1%, the equivalent of a real terms cut in light of the soaring inflation. And at the same time, household costs will rocket. Energy bills were increased by 54% from April, alongside the record high rents and, of course, the national insurance hike. Food price inflation is set at its highest in almost a decade, while we even see even getting tested for the coronavirus is about to add £6 to these bills. The Resolution Foundation says that the conflict in Ukraine will even further push the gas and oil inflation in the UK to above 8% this spring, the biggest hit to households since the 1970s. And you do not have to be an economist to work out what will happen next. If the money going out soars, when the money coming in shrinks in real terms, millions of families who rely on benefits will be experiencing the social economic catastrophe. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation says that at least 9 million families on benefits due to low income will be at least £500 worse off on average from April, and about 40,000 people could be put into poverty. So these numbers are just not good at all. And remember, a lot of people in the UK have jobs, but they are what are called in work poverty, which is again shocking for a country like the UK, where we have the acclamations of certainly the Prime Minister and the rest of the Conservative Party saying how rich and wonderful this country is. But there's a lot of people that are not experiencing that or would share that thought. Of course, we turn to this. Bear in mind, of course, that benefit rates are already at a 30-year low, a level so meager that the government's own research has shown that disabled people are unable to afford food, rents, and energy bills. And that's even before the inflation hike. April's real term benefit cuts comes only a few months after ministers have cut the universal credit uplift of £20 a week. This move came after a decade of cuts and freezes to Social Security, and the only things that have gone up for people on benefits in recent years are the queues at the food bank. Last week, I spoke to Victoria. She told me how she often gets through the day by eating out of date food, tins, and beans handed out at her local shop, the Waste Cafe, where the poorest come for supermarket rejects. Serve the MP, the ME, at the heart of the bowel conditions means that the mum of one now relies on out of work sickness benefits to try and get by, like so many others. And the benefit system leaves her just unable to afford basics. My basics don't even cover a tank of heating oil, she said. Instead, Victoria now covers her windows in bubble wrap, keeps the curtains drawn, and pulls a blanket around her wheelchair to try and keep warm. Again, this is the unfortunate reality for many people in the UK. And yet the Conservatives will say it's exactly the opposite. When energy bills spike, Victoria calculates that she will have to find thousands of pounds extras a year. Ministers may say, may well ask her to find a unicorn. And of course, 30 charities are trying to push the government to raise benefits by at least 6% to be in line with inflation to try and help soften this blow. Yeah. To exact that, the Conservatives, to make the lives of people receiving benefits easier, seems to miss the point. It is not a cliche to say that Tories fundamentally believe that someone on benefits should not be able to have a comfortable life, as if hunger pangs are necessary motivation to get out of poverty, or, to put it another way, to have a certain crowd Social Security users not being able to afford food or heating is not a sign of the system is wrong. It is a sign that the system is working exactly as intended. Just look at the government's recent plan to make universal credit tougher, including forcing job seekers to travel up to 3 hours to apply for jobs where they're not qualified for, or even have their benefits docked. Britain's welfare state, in many ways, is still based on the Victorian morality principles, but instead of workhouses and poor disabled people get sent to the job centre. The cruelty, as they say, is the point. Such the austere policies can often preside under the guise of ministers of saying they cannot afford to increase the benefit rates or ease the eligibility, even if they wanted to, despite the fact that research shows that the state has to shell out huge and increasingly amounts of money to not tackle poverty. Remember that the government will cry poor over benefit rates next month, and it also recently found off over £5 billion to write off fraudulent COVID loans. There is always enough money to do the wrong thing with. It would also be convenient to believe that such things is confined to the worst of the right, but they are not particularly fringe opinions. They have been on the front pages of newspapers for years, and it is accepted that hunger is an aberration for working families, yet somehow justifies for those who claim Social Security. If that is quite right for a certain level of suffering to come with being on benefits, but it would naturally be the wrong thing to happen to other people. Even the use of the term benefit claimant is dehumanizing, encouraging people to think to those who receive benefits as somehow being separate from the population at large. The fact that many people on benefits are actually in work and others are ill or even family carers is apparently still not enough to break this moral binary. Cutting Social Security in real terms in the middle of a cost of living crisis is in many ways the natural endpoint for this narrative. A dark, cruel turn in the events that is only possible in a political culture that long ago lost its hold on any decency or even common sense. And until we actually challenge it, this country is destined to repeat the same old mistakes, becoming an even meaner society, one that is ill-equipped to provide even the most basic essentials for millions of its citizens. The pandemic showed the dramatic state of intervention, of state intervention that could be mobilized in a time of crisis, and that it would be hard to argue that the vast hikes in food and energy prices do not constitute another. Mass hunger and cold are just as much as a sickness as the coronavirus, and a vaccine is available. Raising benefit rates, including a windfall tax on oil and gas producers, introducing the warm homes discount for poor and disabled households, union-backed pay rises for squeezed workers, and of course, in the long term, building more affordable and social housing. It is a reflection on how low we have sunk to get here that we must argue for the most obvious of truths for so-called benefit claimants to matter too. And yeah, I completely agree with this myself. Like I say, I come from a town in the north, in Barnsley. We are still suffering the effects, by the way, of not only the 2008 financial crash up here in the north, as many other towns and cities are, but we are still suffering from the effects of the miners' crisis going back all the way to the 1980s. So yeah, it just goes to show you how successive governments have really failed to really tackle this, idea of poverty. And ironically, most of this stuff that really focused on, tackling benefit claimants actually came under the Labour government when they were actually helping more people on benefits than ever before. Now, of course, there will be disagreements of saying, well, they didn't, but let's face it, look at the Tory government that preceded them, look at the one that was after them as well, and tell me which government you would rather have to try and help take poor people. Like I say, the results speak for themselves. That Labour government lifted hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty, as well as almost eliminating child poverty. And now, under the Tories, thousands of more people have slipped back into poverty. And guess what? Child poverty has risen like a rocket. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, we'll see you all next time.